Hey, my name is Steven de Vijver and welcome to this second Show Me Do on the Perl programming language. Now, in the first part I introduced the Perl command. I showed you how to type statements in interactive mode of Perl and then pressing Ctrl D will execute them. I also showed you how to type Perl statements in a text file using VI and then executing them with the Perl command. And I even showed you how to set your file permissions so that you can actually execute text files directly. Now, in the next 5 or so show me do's on the Perl programming language, I will introduce you to the fundamental things you need to know about Perl before you learn anything else about Perl. So I want to make sure that you understand the basics, because it's very easy to lose focus and start looking at nice, cool things you can do with Perl without first fully understanding what the language is really about. And I had that experience myself by learning a new programming language. It can afterwards be hard to it can be hard if you realize after a while that you actually don't really know the language you're working with. So it can really slow you down. So I want to give you a head start. I will be assuming in this series that you have some programming experience. Doesn't really matter which language you have some experience with. But I will, for example, assume that you know what a variable is, that you know or that you can recognize an expression and a statement, and that you know what an if statement does and what a loop does, and so forth. So in this part I will introduce variables in Perl. Okay, let's get started and type the Perl command, and I'm in interactive mode. And the first thing I do is I'm going to create a variable. I'm creating the variable name and I'm assigning it a value Steven. So let's look at this line. The first thing you'll notice on the left is this $sign and then the name of a variable. So in Perl, this is the notation you'll always use for a variable. There are actually 2 other variable types, and they have a different sign as a prefix, but I'll talk about them later. They are lists and hash maps. And the $sign, if you see a variable with a $sign, you're looking at a scalar. So that is the term Perl uses. And to a scalar you can assign virtually anything you want. So here I'm assigning a string, and a string is surrounded in double quotes. So I'm basically saying to Perl the value Steven goes into the variable name. This $sign is actually pretty easy to remember in Perl because you use it always when you're working with a scalar variable. For example, if I want to print the value of the name variable, I'm going to type print and then $sign name. Now, one thing I should add is that you probably seeing it already. I'm using semicolons to terminate my statements. So this is a statement. It's a variable assignment, and this is also a statement. Perl doesn't require you to use semicolons, but I advise you to do it anyway, because if your Perl scripts will become really long, and you're not using semicolons, then Perl may have difficulties to recognize some of your statements. So if you just add semicolons right from the start, you always do that, then you will not experience any troubles with Perl understanding or not understanding your scripts. Okay, so I've assigned a variable and I typed print statement to print the value of that variable, and I'm now going to press Ctrl D, and Perl is just printing the value of the name variable, which is Steven. Now, as you notice probably, just like in the previous part, I'm having a problem here that there is no new line behind the output of the print statement. I can solve that. So I starting the interactive mode again. I'm saying name equals Steven. And then I can do two things. The first thing I can do is I type print $name, then the dot, and then another string, which is the new line, like this. Or alternatively, I can type as a string, my name is, and then $name, so the variable name, again a new line and a semicolon. And if I now press Ctrl D, Perl prints the new line new line character 2 times, so once for Steven and once for my name is Steven. Okay, two things to notice here. In the first print statement I'm using the dot, and the dot here is a way to concatenate two strings. So $name, the name variable, is a string, and this is also a string, and the dot concatenates these two into one, as you can see here. So Steven and then new line. The second print statement actually includes $name into the string, and yet Perl seems to have replaced $name with its value, and that's something that Perl does when you use a variable inside a string. Now, one thing to notice about strings is that you have two types of strings. You have the ones with the double quotes, like this one. You have the ones with a single quote, and this is causing confusion to quite some people who are learning Perl, and I'm immediately going to reveal the secret between these two string types. So I'm going to create the $name variable again, and I'm again going to say print my name is $name, and I wanted to show the single quotes, of course. So single quote here, my name is $name, and new line, single quote. So I'm using a single quote here and single quote here. So basically I'm creating a string with single quotes. I'm using $name, so the name variable here. And if I press Ctrl D now, you'll see that Perl didn't do anything with $name, just remains in the string. So the difference between string with double quotes, like this one, and a string with single quotes is that Perl does resolve variables in strings with a double quote, but it doesn't resolve them in strings with single quote. and it actually also didn't resolve the new line character. So if you want to print something with Perl, and you want to make absolutely sure that it's printed just the way you typed it, you should use single quotes. And if you want to print something and you want to use, for example, the new character, and you want to use some variables, then you can use a double quote. I almost always use double quotes for my strings, even if they don't have variables. And I very rarely use strings with single quotes. But you now know the difference between them. Okay, let's continue with scalar variables. You can assign anything to a scalar. For example, I can create a variable $value, so the value variable equals the number 100. I can also create a variable $myBoolean, and I assign it to 1. You can assign anything, like I said, and this variable is interesting, myBoolean. The name isn't very interesting, but the value is, because in Perl you can use any variable as a Boolean. I'll come back to that in the next part. But for now you can remember that if a variable has 1 as its value, it's considered to be true, and if it's got another value, or actually if it's got 0, it's false. So 0 and everything lower than 0 is false, and 1 and everything above 1 is true. So now I'm going to print these values. So my value equals $value, and my Boolean equals $myBoolean. So since I'm using double quotes here for my string, Perl will print the actual values of $value and $myBoolean. Okay, so that was it for this Show Me Do, the second Show Me Do on the Perl programming language. I showed you how to use scalar variables in Perl. They can hold anything you want, and most typically they hold strings or numbers or booleans, but later on in this Show Me Do series on Perl, I will show that they can also hold many other kinds of values. So in the next part, the third part on the Perl programming language, I will talk about doing calculations in Spring, so adding and dividing and multiplying numbers, and I will also talk about the if and else statement in Perl. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or remarks, or you would like to learn something specific about the Perl language, then please leave a message on the Show Me Do website, and we'll certainly look into that. In the meanwhile, have fun with Perl. I advise you to just try what you've seen here, so that you can get some hands-on feeling with Perl, and so that you will be ready to learn about the next things I'm going to introduce to you. Until next time.